Hi, I'm Ernie,
And I'm Ben.
and this is Budget Nerds.
What was all in your mind?
You are not alone.
No, you are not. Friends, Ben, welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to be talking about something that dawned on me recently. Now, Ben, I don't know if you know this. Actually, you do know this because we just talked about it.
Sometimes we pretend like we haven't talked about something that we do. We're actors, Ernie.
As soon as that came out of my mouth, I'm like, well, what are you saying,
Well,
Ernie?
we talked
just
a
tell
little
the truth
before
here.
we hit record, and then we have to pretend like we didn't talk about those things, so we can talk about it while we're recording. So,
But we do talk very, very little. We're always like, no, save it for the
talking
episode.
about the topic, and we're like, what we should do. They do this on. I feel like Jesse does this on the Beginning Balance podcast. Like they just start the conversation in the middle, but then we couldn't do our intro. So I don't know. It's not our style. We just pretend. Anyways.
Anywho, we've been at this thing 4 years now.
Man.
This is episode 98, so almost 100 of them. And over the course of those 4 years, those almost 100 episodes, we've had an opportunity to engage with a lot of the Budget Nerd community. We've heard from you in YouTube comments. A lot of you send us emails. We read your posts in the fans group on Facebook. And I realized one day, oh my goodness, YNAB'ers, a lot of the time, and a whole bunch of YNAB'ers, like a staggering amount of YNAB'ers, are accomplishing multiple goals at once.
Yeah, it's true. Like
Things like this.
every win is like, oh, I paid off a bunch of debt, and also cash flowed this and this and this and this, right?
Right. And that felt abnormal to me. You know, like I don't know how often that's happening in other personal finance communities because it's happening all the time. And so I just wanted to dedicate an episode to this phenomenon and just we'll talk about it.
Nice. All right. So do you have some examples of this, like that you've seen out in the community, or is it just generally you like people seem to talk about the things they accomplish, and it's more than one thing at the same time?
Yeah, I found some wins that we're going to share with the specific examples. But, you know, the things I came up with off the top of my head, I saved for a trip of a lifetime while paying off all my debt.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a car in cash while paying for graduate school. Paid for a big car repair and replaced the hot water heater in the same month.
Yeah.
I just remember a time in my life where it was one or the other.
Right.
Like I couldn't even consider pursuing more than one financial goal.
Right.
You know, and the mentality was get as intense as possible and go after that. And then once you're done with that one, you move on to the next one.
Right. And I think there is some power in that, in the focus, you know, but
oh, absolutely.
I think we just have a culture, like even the way you phrased that, Ernie, you said, I saved for a trip of a lifetime while paying off all my debt. I feel like a lot of other ways of framing that could be like, I paid off all this debt and also I went on this awesome trip, you know, but like the trip comes first, because I think, when we talk about YNAB, we're about enjoying your money and actually expressing yourself in the world in the way that you spend money. And it's not just all about paying off debt, even though that's a good thing because you can then express yourself more in the world because you have more cash flow, right? But I think we're a little more focused on the fun stuff, you know, on the fulfilling things as well.
Absolutely. And so what do you think is the reason for this? Like, why are so many YNAB'ers able to accomplish multiple things at the same time?
Yeah, well, I think rule 2 jumps out right out of the gate, right? We teach YNAB'ers to consider long and also short-term goals at the same time. So already right away, we teach people, hey, think about things that are coming up in the long term, but while you're also thinking about the rent payment. Right. And so right away, you're already doing two things at once instead of, because you could just be focused on your monthly bills and only that. But immediately we're like, hey, you know, you got to think about what's coming a year from now, or 10 years from now or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's a core part of the YNAB method, right?
And, not only does that help you save money, like right away, you do that 2 months in a row and you've already saved money. Well, 1 month and you've saved money, right? You put $25 aside for car repairs. That's saving money for car repairs. And you do that 2 months in a row. Like that snowball gets rolling really quickly. But what it's doing is it's instilling this habit. And YNAB'ers might not even realize it, but like there's just this new mentality that they have when money arrives in their life. Like without even thinking, they are probably naturally considering long-term and short-term all at once.
Right. Yeah, we used to say a lot, think long, act now. Right?
Ooh, I remember that.
That's an old school YNAB phrase that I don't think we say very much anymore, but I think it's really powerful because we're thinking about the long term, but we're acting now by actually setting aside money for it. So you're kind of living in the moment, but you're also thinking about the future. And like you said, you build that muscle, and I think because every single time you sit down and you do it over and over again, because every time you get paid
over and over,
it's not just right. Like all these things are a practice that you do over and over. So instead of some other financial methods, you might set a plan, set up a budget, and that's it. Like you did it once and then you just stick to that for the rest of your life, right?
Yep.
But the YNAB way is more every time you get paid, you're thinking. And so you do it over and over and over again. So you build this muscle of thinking about multiple things at once. And so when it comes time to say, oh, I want to pay off debt, but I also want to go out on a vacation, well, you have this skill of prioritizing and maybe even splitting up and doing both, So,
and it doesn't happen right away.
It's kind of baked in.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, for me, at least for me, it didn't happen right away. I remember how awkward and difficult it was to embrace Rule 2. I mean, it was awkward because I didn't really have a feeling for what my paychecks needed to do. Like, what does this money actually need to do right now? And a lot of times I guessed wrong. So I would make an allocation and then I would change it like days later. But you do that enough and you're like, oh, you kind of get into this flow. And then it was hard because I was used to spending that money pre-YNAB. Once the monthly bills were taken care of, it was, okay, let's just do whatever we want with this money. And a lot of times Christy and I would just decide to blow it on, restaurants or fun stuff like that. But now we have to actually consider some of those more long-term things. So it's like, I feel this pinch. But
right, because you are acknowledging that you don't have as much cash flow that's free as you might think you do. Right?
And that's not fun.
And that can be painful. Yeah, it can be.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I might have this car repair in 6 months, but I'm not going to go out to eat right now. But
right. Yeah, it seems a little crazy when you put it that way. But it's so not crazy. It's so good,
Oh, but once you actually pay for that true expense, like once the car actually breaks down and you look at YNAB and you're like, oh my goodness, the money's there. Like I can actually pay for this thing. I don't have to go back into debt for it. That's where
sometimes I feel
I'm
like
never going back.
I'm telling people please just trust me, because with Rule 2, sometimes I think you need that moment of oh, I can just pay for this. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. You need that moment, but you might not feel it for a while, So please just trust me. This is gonna be awesome, and if you do it, then you'll see the benefit of it, right?
Yeah.
We get that too when we talk about our debt pay down method that we teach at YNAB. The most controversial bit of it is don't throw every single last penny at the debt, right? Save for non-monthly expenses as you go, because then you're just going to go back into debt if you don't save for the car repair. When the car breaks, you're going to have to reach for the credit card, and you might make faster progress if you threw all that car repair money at the debt, but then you're just going to go back. And so it's going to be this stutter step thing. And it's so frustrating. I'd rather you make slower progress that's more steady, because that's actually more motivating in the long run, and you'll actually get to the finish line. And so that's another example of we accomplish multiple goals at once, because sometimes there's things that are really big. Like you said, the replace the hot water heater, right? But I also paid off debt, you know. I mean, that's a true expense. Like, it's just something you have to take care of, but it also feels like a huge accomplishment because it's so big, you know.
The debt thing, I remember that throwing me off in YNAB because I came from the camp where like, I'm going to get as intense as possible with my debt pay down. Like I want to, I had the mentality of I want to remove it as quickly as possible. But that caused me to manage my money in an unsustainable way because I wasn't putting money aside for those true expenses. So when they would pop up, you know, like the big, I don't know what it was. It's probably changed from episode to episode, $1,200 or $1,600 car repair that I had years and years and years ago. Didn't have money to pay for it because all of our extra money was going towards paying off this debt. So yeah, that took a while. And I don't actually, my memory's a little foggy. I don't know if I ever truly embraced it, you know, until I paid off a whole bunch of the debt and I realized, oh man, I wish I would have done that a little bit differently, made the plan a little bit more sustainable. But looking back, I know I would have done it differently.
It might have caused you a little less pain because you got all this like back and forth between more debt.
Oh, the constant back and forth.
Right. But you were just so tenacious, Ernie. You stuck with it anyway. You know?
I'm going to figure out a way.
But I really want to save people that pain. I mean, this idea is huge. I remember, and we always taught this. It's funny. I'm like going back to 2019. Okay, yeah, this is when this happened. So we always taught this. It's like we're like, oh yeah, you know, you really should save for, you know, car repairs, and we always go to car repairs. It's like it's like the quintessential example, right? You should really pay for car repairs or save for car repairs and all these non-monthly things before you. I don't want to say before because you could do both at the same time. It's a higher priority than paying off past debt, right? So preventing future debt is a higher priority. So if you don't have enough to do both, you should do the first one. You should do rule 2 first, right? But you can still do both. And we always kind of taught it as just like, yeah, this is something you should do. And then we started running the Debt Bootcamp. Do you remember this, Ernie, back in 2019?
I remember
it's still
that.
going. We have a email series, which I'm slated to rewrite at some point because it needs some love. I think it's been a while. We had an email series for it now, and we have a Facebook group. So actually, if you are really going after debt, you should join the YNAB Debt Bootcamp Facebook group. It's great.
I'll put a link to that in the chat or in the chat. in
the description.
Yeah.
The dibbly do in the bottom there. Yeah. What do they call it? Anyways. Y'all know what I mean. But back in 2019, we had like a huge number of people and a bunch of Facebook groups where we were just really hard teaching how to get out of debt.
Yep.
And we had, in these groups, we had live events and we had all this curriculum and it was great. And because we got immediate feedback, me and Aaron were doing this a lot. Because we got immediate feedback, we realized how powerful this teaching was. We had people saying over and over again, oh my gosh, this is what I've been missing. This is the piece that I've been missing. And then we had some people that were pushing back. We're like, I don't know, man. Like, I think I should throw everything at the debt. And we're like, don't do it. And then like a bunch of people would come in and be like, don't do it. You really got to save for these non-monthly things. And we found new ways of teaching it. I think this idea of debt prevention came out of that. And so after that experience of teaching it really intensely and getting that immediate feedback from people, we realized, oh, this is actually something that not a lot of people are teaching as far as debt prevention and debt pay down plans. And also it's super, super duper powerful because it allows people to not only pay off debt, but also prevent future debt so they don't have this constant back and forth and they don't get demotivated, which is huge because paying off debt is often such a long slog. And so if you have something that's just knocking your legs out from under you over and over again, it can be really discouraging. So yeah, that was the experience that really lit a fire under me after this, because I think we always kind of taught it as like an aside, but now it's like the main thing, you know?
And this is a practice as well. You know, it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel hard at first, but you do that enough months in a row. And then you realize, oh, this is actually really sustainable and I can do this. And then that's when the light bulb starts going off, I think. You realize, oh, I can save for true expenses and still pay off my debt. Like have a plan, and maybe even a little bit of an aggressive plan as well. So, okay, I can do these two things at once. What else can I throw into the mix?
Yeah, you acknowledge your true cash flow situation, so you really know. Because if you don't, you always kind of have this feeling in the back of your mind, like, oh, I can throw $1,000 a month at the debt or some huge amount like that, right? But you're like, but can I? Because there's something. I feel like something's always going to come and bite me, you know? And it doesn't just apply to debt either. Like this could apply to anything that you're saving up for too. Any kind of savings as well.
Sure.
If you're like, maybe you're going on that trip of a lifetime and you really want to get after it, but you also want to do it in a sustainable way that's not gonna come back and bite you, right? Same exact principle, right? You need to save for both things at once and accomplish multiple goals at once. Otherwise, especially when we're talking about something that is going to happen. It's going to happen. That's what Rule 2 is all about. Like, just acknowledge, hey, these things are going to happen. We got to deal with it, right?
So Rule 2, I mean, that's why YNAB'ers are able to accomplish so many things at the same time. They're building that habit, building that muscle of thinking both the here and now and also in the future. Yeah. But there's another piece that I think contributes to this as well, and did we label this the 5th rule in a recent episode? But it's this idea of finding the money first.
Yeah.
And how that contributes to this thing we're talking about.
Yeah, we did an episode just on this.
Yeah. And I think we did label it the 5th rule or
yeah, it feels like it. Yeah. So find the money first is a principle that we teach in YNAB where basically you check your plan before you spend. And if you don't have enough to spend on whatever you want, instead of overspending and then covering it later, find the money first. Look through your categories, decide what trade-off you're going to make.
Yeah.
And then move the money. And the difference here is instead of doing the thing and then having to deal with it later because you overspent, actually give yourself the opportunity to say no, or just give yourself the opportunity to make that trade-off decision ahead of time with your eyes wide open, right? It makes a huge difference. It actually, I think that's when you're doing that, that's when your plan actually starts to affect your life.
Yeah.
And you actually start to make real progress.
Yeah, quick example. You've had a long day. Kids have been difficult. Job was stressful. You get home. Last thing you feel like doing is making supper. So you want to order takeout, but you decide to check YNAB first. And you're like, okay, where could I take the money from? And you go through all these categories. You're like, nope, can't take from that money. Nope, can't take from that category. And what you're doing is, okay, what would I rather have? Would I rather have this vacation? Or would I rather have an extra $100 to put towards my debt or this takeout meal? And just by going through that exercise of like, here are my actual priorities. What do I want more? It just realigns you.
Yeah.
And so maybe in this particular example, you decide, okay, actually this vacation that I want to take and this extra $100 towards my debt pay down, I really want to make sure that happens. So let's scrounge through the freezer and the refrigerator and find something that I can make really quickly for supper instead of ordering takeout.
Yeah. And it happens in the moment, but also over the long term. Like you might look at it, maybe you do decide to take from the vacation, and then you notice over time, I'm not making as much progress as I'd like toward that vacation. And the next time, and you have that in your mind, and the next time you need to make that trade-off decision, you say, no, I need to not do that because I really value this, and your values, because you're doing this over and over and over again, you're doing it every time you spend money. Because you're doing it so often, your values really rise to the top and you reinforce them over time.
Yeah.
You remind yourself what matters to you, and then you start making it happen. Because I think a lot of the time we don't accomplish these goals, not so much because we're not disciplined or we don't care, but it's more that we don't remember what is important to us. You know what I mean?
That is a great point.
It's so easy to just kind of forget.
It is.
Especially because life is crazy and things are always changing. And yeah, but if you do this practice of looking at it and reminding yourself, no, I decided a while ago that this is what I was going to go after. And you can remind yourself that that's what you care about. You can start dreaming, and you dream a little bit every day instead of just like once and then forget it. You know? And when you remind yourself, you actually start accomplishing it.
Oh man, I love how you frame that, because I think a lot of times we beat ourselves up. Oh, I made another bad decision. I overspent on eating out, once again. But I think a lot of times it is, we just forget. Life is crazy. There's a million different things going on. Our brains are going all over the place, and we forget what those priorities are.
And it's not even like a bad decision. It's just like a decision that's contrary to what you want.
Yeah.
And in order to know what's contrary to what you want, you have to know what you want. And because it's so easy to forget, you have to remind yourself over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's why we write it down, and that's why we check it, Or, it could go the other way too. Like you could say, hey, I've been taking money out of this vacation category all the time to go do takeout. Maybe I actually do value the takeout more than the vacation. And maybe I need to acknowledge that this thing that I previously really wanted, I no longer want. And that's okay too. It's okay to make that acknowledgement as well. And then maybe make a more permanent change in how you allocate your money on a regular basis.
Man, YNAB is just so good at forcing us to think about our priorities. I love that.
That's what it's all about.
That's something I recently
How do you
did.
want to spend your money?
I've said this a million times on the show. I have one fun money category. I know a lot of people have like a group and then they break it all down. You do that. You and Caitlin do that.
Yeah.
I've always just had that one singular category, and I keep everything in my head. But recently, my goal is to get new golf clubs. I'm getting back into golf. And I realize I don't have as much money in my fun money category to both buy new clubs and continue to eat out at Chipotle all the time and do all this other stuff. So I separated, I created a new category, Ernie Golf. And boy, that just, when I open YNAB and scroll through my categories, that hits me front and center every single time.
Yeah.
And I'm reminded, okay, I want to buy new golf clubs. I want to start hitting practice balls more. I want to get out and play 9 holes more. So it just, reminds me of what my priorities are. And then my decisions just naturally fall in line.
Yeah. You might actually start going to Chipotle a little less.
I have.
And then and that's good, not because, it's like bad to go to Chipotle, but because you have something else you want.
I want to get golfing more.
And you kept forgetting because you didn't have a category, Now you check it and you're reminded, So there's something there. That's I think we just covered something really good there. You have to remind yourself, because it's all about figuring out how you want to spend your money, and you have to, it's easy to forget. So you got to remind yourself. So that's another thing, just yet another thing that Find the Money First does for you. I love that concept. So good.
All right, we've talked through rule 2. We've talked through finding the money first. Anything else to this accomplishing multiple goals at the same time thing?
Yeah, I think it just kind of comes from thinking really hard about your money on a regular basis. This is the difference from a lot of other personal finance methods out there, where you say, okay, here's my one goal, and I'm going to go after that and focus only on that. I think because we are coming back to the practice of prioritizing over and over and over again, we find maybe those goals change, or maybe the goal that you're going after isn't quite as important to you, and you could add something else and work on that as well. So I think it kind of flows out of the nature of the practice, of the YNAB practice, because we're doing it over and over and over again. We kind of acknowledge that these priorities can change. And as a result, you end up accomplishing more than one thing, because something pops up, like something pops up that you didn't value before that you do now. And so you start going after that as well. But maybe you still value the old thing, so you're going after that too. So I really think it's all about that practice of checking it regularly. And that it kind of comes out of that, I don't know. What do you think? Does that make sense?
That makes complete sense. Pre-YNAB, I was in the spreadsheet, I don't know, twice a week, once a week.
Right.
And it was kind of a drag. It was like, okay, here's another chore that I have to do as an adult. But for YNAB, like, I instantly became addicted. I wanted to be in it all the time. And I just wanted to stare at things. Like, I just want to look
Yeah.
at my category balances, look at my account balances. And I think it's because that awareness piece. Like, I could actually see my life in these numbers now. And I could see like the potential of it unfolding as we go forward. And that was just really exciting. I was in, it just gave me hope for all of this future change. And so, yeah, I mean, call it a practice, or maybe it's an obsession. I don't know. Maybe it's both for some people like myself. But yeah, that was a huge piece for me.
Yeah. It's all about doing more with your money, do more of what you want, And I also think there's an element, maybe one reason why we hear these kinds of things in the stories in the YNAB wins that we share here on the show and elsewhere, is because we emphasize it a little more. Like, we value paying for the HVAC system, right, as a big accomplishment. But I think, if you hear other stories, it's all about all the debt you paid off or the house that you bought. And they're like, nobody wants to hear about, I paid for a car repair in cash. That's boring. But we actually don't think it's boring. We think it's really exciting.
Yeah.
Because we compare it to how we were before and how much peace it's giving us. And so I think because we emphasize it so much, we hear more about it. And I think that's great.
I mean, personally, I think I got more excited for the first year we paid for Christmas in cash than I did when I paid off the final student loan. Like, when I paid off the final student loan, I was like, okay. Like, I thought it was going to be this.
I hear this all the time. It's anticlimactic. It really is.
It was so depressing. But that first Christmas, I was like, oh my goodness, this feels amazing. Plus, because we had always used the previous or the next year's tax refund to pay off the previous year's Christmas. So I was like, okay, we not only paid for this in cash, we just freed up this tax refund coming in a couple months. And now what do we want to do with this?
Yeah, because you are enjoying in the moment more, seeing your kids open presents, you got them, right? Because it's not like this pit in your stomach, right? Along with it. So like the experience itself is not so tainted by the debt, right? And then there's another win after that because you actually get to have your money that you get to decide what you want to do with your money instead of just having to take care of past things that are already done. It feels better to pay for things in the moment because you're enjoying it in the moment. Later, you got the tax return and you're like, I got to take care of the thing. I got to like pay for my happy feelings 3 months ago instead of paying for my happy feelings now. It feels better. I'm with you. I love that we celebrate all of those wins, right? The little ones. I even hate calling them, separating them little, big, but they're all good. I remember back when we first started doing YNAB wins on the show, I was like, oh man, is it just gonna be like paid off $1 bajillion of debt? And like I didn't want to have that kind of win over and over and over and over again, because that's all you hear. And like if you paid off $1 bajillion of debt, please write into us and tell us about it. I want to hear about those ones awesome too. But I think because we said, hey, big or small, whatever it is, please send it to us. We get such variety of interesting wins. So yeah, should we read some of those wins now?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I have Jonathan and Sammy who wrote in over an email. Said last month, which was March 2024. Thank you for putting in the month in the email because we're always so late on these. Last month, March 2024, the brakes went out on our car and the windshield cracked and my main computer died. We have been YNABing for about a year and our car repair and computer repair category wasn't large enough to cover all the repairs. However, we rolled with the punches and reprioritized money from a lot of other categories. We managed to get through a really tough month thanks to YNAB. Now the new brakes work great, the new windshield is perfect, and my computer is running better than ever. This is the first month where I really felt like we could handle adulthood challenges without collapsing into a puddle of stress. Love that. Yeah. There's some of those months, where it's just
All at
everything goes
once.
wrong.
Why?
Yeah. I've kind of had a year like that too. So maybe I could talk about that sometime soon. But yeah, but you handled it, and not only that, but things are better. Like you have better running computer than you did before, and you feel good about it too. So
that's the purpose
awesome.
of money. All right. My win comes from Michaela. I was introduced to YNAB during the pandemic by a coworker of my dad's, but I was living at home at the time, finishing out my undergraduate degree, and my expenses were really inconsistent thanks to my parents' generosity and steps that the government and my university were taking to alleviate unreasonable burdens for students. For that reason, and the fact that I struggled to dive into the YNAB method, it didn't stick the first time. However, in 2021, I decided to return to school for my master's program. I ended up taking out a huge loan, over $12,000, my first year, as I was concerned about the cost of living in a new state where my student employment was uncertain. At the start of my second year, I needed to decide how much money I was going to take out for my second year in my master's program. I needed a way to determine how much money I actually had in the bank and what I could and was willing to apply to my education. Long story short, I remembered YNAB, applied for my 34-day free trial, and dove wholeheartedly into all the resources YNAB has available to help me make the decision. I watched every Heard It From Hannah video, read countless blogs, and checked out community groups online. For the second year, I was able to take out a minimal loan, one that I felt reasonably sure I could pay off either while I was studying or shortly after I finished my program. And for the final year, I was able to not take out any loans at all. Additionally, I was able to keep a small nest egg for job hunting and house hunting after I graduated. I love the perspective that YNAB has given me and the comfort and freedom I have now been able to, I now have in being able to control my finances. Thank you. Congratulations, Michaela.
I love that.
And yeah, it looks like the second try with YNAB, you did dive into that YNAB method, especially the true expenses. Totally. You're able to come out, you didn't take any loans out in that final year. And then you had this money left over for your housing moving forward, job hunting. I love that.
Yeah. And I love that there's like incremental improvement. It's not like, oh, I took out $1 bajillion in loans and then next year I didn't. It's like, no, I just took out a little less, and the next year I took out a little less, and then eventually none, and it just got better and better. So yeah, it's such a good story.
Well, if you have a YNAB win, or if you want to share with us how you've been accomplishing or how you've accomplished multiple goals at the same time, share them with us. You can comment on the YouTube video. Otherwise, email us directly, budgetnerds@ynab.com.
All right. We'll see you all later. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Happy YNABing.